White Mage and Endwalker is an interesting one to say the least. The core foundation for the job doesn't actually change, but for some reason it just feels different. Back in Shadowbringers, White Mage, in my opinion, was one of the best designed jobs for its role. Every little thing was sewn together perfectly: the lilies, their healing, their damage. They had a very defined weakness and strength. But in its current state, it just feels like there's a bunch of cogs with no gear to turn them. That's not to say the job is bad or unfun, because when actually playing it in Extreme Trials, it was actually pretty fun. The job, if anything, has a solid foundation still and just needs some quality of life to pick it up. I want to mention briefly that this video is sponsored by Phase Temperance, a Discord for healing guides and healer optimization discussions. Myself and other top-end healers frequent the server, so if you have any questions or just want to chat, come on by. The Discord also hosts a variety of competitive and social PvE events in Final Fantasy XIV, ranging from hardcore PvE events to clearing Savage and Ultimate turns for different charities. If you enjoy this video and you want to join, I've linked the Discord in the description. I'll see you there. White Mage throughout the history of the game was the straightforward healer. The healer that could seamlessly fall back on their GCD healing, the healer with one of the best MP economies, the recovery healer. It went by so many identities in the past, but where does that leave it now? It's still straightforward, sure. Its toolkit is riddled with easy to understand abilities that do upfront healing, meaning they heal in the now and not the then. It will probably always keep this identity of being the best beginner healer, but what about the others? Do they still have GCD power? Yeah, in a way they do. Cure 3 is still the strongest option in the game when concerning GCD heals, and when used in conjunction with Plenary Indulgence becomes a massive 800 potency heal every 2.5 seconds for its duration. They also have their lilies, which can also be used with Plenary and are additionally instant cast and cost no mana. They can also use Presence of Mind to increase the speed at which these GCDs go out. This is all really strong and emphasizes White Mage's overall core strength of being the strongest GCD healer. There's only one issue: their MP economy. For some reason, the healer that has to rely on their GCD heals before any other healer also has the highest MP consumption on their spells. Cure 3 costing a massive 1500 MP means realistically you'll never be able to use this multiple times in a row in a recovery situation without potentially costing your ability to raise or even do damage, so you'll end up having to choose between using Thin Air on Cure 3 or Raise. What's most annoying to me is that when you compare similar abilities in nature to its pure healer correspondent, Astrologian, abilities like Helios and Aspected Helios are the same potency to Medica 1 and Medica 2, but cost 200 MP less. And their single target heal, Benefic 2, costs 300 MP less than Cure 2. This makes zero sense from a balancing standpoint, as not only does Astrologian currently have the best MP management out of all the healers, but also will hardly ever have to resort to GCD healing in the first place due to their incredibly potent and low cooldown healing abilities. While these differences in MP may seem small, they add up very fast, especially in higher difficulty content where there's more instances of egregious healing requirements. It's also hard to even call them a decent recovery healer in their current state. Its previously mentioned issues aside, it also struggles fairly heavily currently in post-death recovery. When playing White Mage in the Extreme Trials, there was a pool where I had died, and after raising it took at least 2 lucid dreaming cycles to even get into a comfortable MP range again. This was also in a fight which had little healing, so it didn't require any GCD heals after death. This while also having a large amount of piety due to the gear available at the moment, meaning it's only going to be worse in fights that actually require you to use your GCD heals after dying or when you can't run as much piety. Couple this with the fact that you lose every lily you had stocked if you die, meaning you can't even use them to compensate for some MP or a boost of healing, and it makes it extremely rigid and uncomfortable when compared to Astrologian. When also looking at the Astrologian, who can just execute an Astrodyne after they die and they are instantly okay due to their potent MP restoration effect and then no longer losing seals on death, and it's a bit of a slap in the face. The last thing I want to mention before moving on to the healing abilities are the current state of the lilies. To be frank, they are awful. Not only do they feel bad to use now due to the changes to the cast them of Glare, they are extremely flawed in its current design. Previously in Shadowbringers, using lilies in your rotation was actually optimal as it created weave space for a size which enabled you to use it for other purposes such as a movement tool, because we never wanted to end a fight with any blood lily stocked. In White Mage's current state, because they serve no purpose outside of using it for healing or movement in full uptime fights, this leaves us in a situation where even if we just use one lily, we're losing a huge 310 potency at minimum. This is because if we are forced into a situation where we only use one lily, it's technically not even worth using the other two to gain and inflate its misery, because that itself is a 340 potency loss in total. This also puts us in a position where if we need to heal with a GCD before the end of the fight and we only need one but haven't used any lilies yet, it's actually more optimal to do something like Medica 2 that's more HPS efficient. This not only feels extremely bad and very unsatisfying when put in the situation, it's also very unhealthy for playing in the party party finder or random groups, as the system encourages you to ignore using one of White Mage's core healing systems. While this next part only refers to a very small percentage of the player base, I'd still like to bring attention to this issue, as many players wanting to optimize their damage will find this problem to be a nuisance. Because you want to avoid using lilies in speed kills or optimization due to their massive loss in potency, this also means you're not only losing access to Rapture or Soulless heals, but you're also losing access to Plenary Indulgence, as using it with Rapture is one of the most efficient uses of it. This means White Mage's only AoE healing options in these optimization scenarios are Size, Asylum, and Liturgy of the Bell, and 2 of those have lengthy cooldowns. This can lead to White Mage feeling like a pretty awful co-healing partner in optimization when compared to the other healers and what they can do without losing damage. While this doesn't just affect optimization, it also affects progression rating to an extent, as damage can be a very important component in the final turn. My solution to this is just to make Lily's DPS neutral at minimum, or even DPS positive at most. Not only will this encourage actually utilizing a major part of your healing kit, but it would also open up interesting opportunities like placing Misery under burst windows. This also wouldn't be overpowered by any means, as currently when speaking about efficient healing capabilities, White Mage is one of the worst off. If White Mage gets one change before the Savage patch, this is actually the one I want to see the most. Before moving on, I want to reiterate and make very clear that these issues are not things that you should doom and gloom over. These are very easily fixable changes, and the core foundation of the White Mage is solid and just needs a few tweaks and quality of life adjustments. Now, let's move on to some of the changes to its toolkit, starting with the healing abilities. Let's start with the biggest one first, Liturgy of the Bell, or Lily Bell from the Mediator. This ability still has some of the issues that I mentioned previously, however some like its cooldown duration aren't as prominent due to the changes to Macrocosmos' cooldown getting increased. Let's talk a bit about this ability. Liturgy is a very strong ability, arguably one of the strongest in the game, but also one of the most niche at the same time. This is because when Liturgy works, man does it work. But when there's no damage that procs on the White Mage multiple times, or the damage is spaced too far apart, it can fall a bit behind in healing potency relative to the other healing abilities. This is because the cure potency is halved for every remaining stack left not utilized. This is actually pretty relevant in the second extreme trial, as there's nothing but the damage at the end of the fight where you can gain the full effect of Liturgy. Another fallback of Liturgy, which we actually see in the same trial, is that it doesn't proc off damage that's shorter than 1 second apart, meaning for multi-hit damage that has fast damage intervals, it will only proc on every other hit. Thankfully though, it works on bleeds, which was something we were unsure of from the Mediator. This means for mechanics that apply a dot onto you, think of Titan, Neo X-Death, or anything of the sort, Liturgy will be very strong. Overall, Liturgy of the Bell, holy shit, I'm tired of saying that, is a very powerful ability, but the issue with it is that it's niche, and one of the main causes for that is because of the potency falloff. For a 3-minute ability to potentially only be anywhere from 1000 to 1200 potency is pretty underwhelming, and the feeling is further amplified due to White Mage already having a weaker off global healing kit compared to its competition. Removing the falloff potency would not only make the skill largely more accessible, but also potentially more interesting, as you could place it for mechanics in advance and have it explode for a large potency heal right after you take large AoE damage. This would also make it much better to use in dungeons, as you're not going to get much value out of it unless you're purposely standing in AoEs. Aqua Veil is pretty nice. There's really not too much to say about it. It leans on the stronger side for a healing tool. It's a flat mitigation ability with nothing attached to it, so you can use it pretty much on anything from dungeon pulls to boss tank busters to even just auto attack damage. It's just one of the better universal tools you can use, and because it's on a very short cooldown of 60 seconds, you should use it as much as possible. 50% extra mitigation also isn't anything to really scoff at, as it's almost the equivalent to an extra tank cooldown. So if you ever have a tank that's not exactly popping their cooldowns as well as they could be, then you know what you can use. One thing to be careful with of Aqua Veil though is that the mitigation suffers diminishing returns, so if you use it on a tank that's already using all of their cooldowns, commonly referred to as kitchen sinking, then the effect is going to be greatly reduced. Divine Benison getting an extra charge is also a very nice quality of life. Not only does it let you start the instance with the extra mitigation tool at your disposal, but it also lets you pool your usages of the skill for more meaningful damage, similar to how Essential Dignity works. Previously, if we wanted to use Divine Benison for a specific point in the fight, we'd either have to sit on it or have it lined up automatically, but now because of the charge system, it enables us to have it up as long as we have one stocked. At the most basic level, you should strive to keep one charge of this ability on cooldown unless you need both usages for a specific need. This will give you some decent sustain on the tank's HP. One weird thing with Divine Benison though is that it actually got left behind when compared to Celestial Intersection, as CI now applies practically instantly, whereas Divine Benison takes quite a while longer to register due to the effect being tied to its animation. This makes using it in tense moments much less reliable. Holy 3. Okay, so this ability is kind of, weird. Did they just forget to lower the cast time to 1.5 seconds? I mean, on one hand, this is technically good for white mages in raids, as in fights with downtime we can precast a holy before the boss comes back, letting us get a free 150 potency GCD that the other healers can't do. On the other hand, this feels immensely awful to use in dungeons or just AoE situations, because the longer cast time can result in both missing enemies if they move before the cast time finishes, while also making it impossible to weave in healing without clipping your GCD. It can also be annoying to maneuver AoEs that form around the enemy or target players, which is very common in dungeons. This was honestly one of the most annoying things to deal with when dungeon leveling, as you just lose almost a second worth of damage every time you have to heal the tank or even just a size. You also can't use Holy like the other healers' AoE abilities because of the stun effect. This means we can't use it when trying to damage enemies before a pull is finished, but hey, at least you can still use your dot. Okay, so Thin Air. This kind of cycles back into the start of the video where we talked about the MP, but this is one of the changes that really brought the ceiling down to White Mage's MP economy. Thin Air is now in a charge system, stacking up to a total of 2 charges and only works on the next spell used. This effectively means we're only gaining 1 GCD under each use. This change is actually very good on paper but just poorly executed. The charge system is actually an excellent idea as it enables more spaced out usages without losing uses, but I really don't know what they were thinking about making it only affect the next spell. Not only does it severely hamper one of White Mage's core strengths, but it also nerfs its recovery potential. There's a couple of changes that I can recommend to make it flow better. Either make the skill work similar to Monk's Riddle of Earth, letting each use affect the next 3 spells, which would make it almost identical to how it was used before, where each Thin Air use would only affect 5 to 6 spells. The other change is just to make it a 30-second cooldown with 3 charges. This would still make it a bit weaker than old Thin Air in terms of overall MP management, but would make it much more versatile for using it on raises or just generalized healing, while simultaneously giving White Mage a shot at better recovery. The Presence of Mind reduction to 2 minutes is happily welcome, and it was a long time coming. I remember this being requested all the way back in Stormblood, and I'm glad that we finally got what we wanted. Presence of Mind is one of our core recovery tools, letting us pump out some serious healing and fast, and because of this reduction, this makes it up slightly more frequently. This change is also very nice from a damage perspective, as now Presence lines up with every burst window, leading White Mage to do some serious damage under buffs, especially when paired with Misery or Size. One change I wish they would have added is to put a Size on the charge system. Because we currently use a Size pretty much on cooldown due to its powerful damage capabilities, sometimes that can lead to issues with healing, as it's not always best to hold a Size for healing purposes, and it's actually better to do a GCD heal than lose a usage of it. Putting it on the charge system would not only make it more adaptable, but would also give it more variety and flavor, letting you either actually heal with it or pool usages for burst windows, similar to how Phlegma works on Sage, where you can use it for movement or damage. Overall, White Mage has its issues currently, but the foundation is still very solid and it has a working toolkit. It just needs some quality of life adjustments. White Mage has a straightforward healing playstyle centered around powerful GCD heals that allow it to excel in reactionary environments like Progression and the Party Finder. They also possess some of the strongest burst healing options in the game, with the combination of Cure 3, Plenary Indulgence, and Liturgy. A large majority of their toolkit is also centered around a 20 Yalm radius rather than the standard 15 Yalm kit, giving them an advantage over the other healers in specific scenarios. White Mage also doesn't have a raid buff, which means it doesn't have to rely on the party to perform to its maximum potential, something that is very strong in progression or random group content. White Mage also benefits the most from downtime, as they can stock their lilies to use them during it to gain extra usages of miseries in fights. They are also one of the biggest benefactors in fights with short adds phases, as they are able to deal a large amount of AoE damage in a short period of time because of misery and a size. We'll see on Tuesday if they decide to do any changes to White Mage, otherwise we'll have to wait until the Savage patch. I'm a bit behind on videos where I want to be, but the Astrologian video is going to be out soon. I'm just going to get more experience on it and then push it out, so I'll see you there.